Well, welcome to today's session. I am going to be speaking regarding a concept that I call the love tax. Now, everything that we have, everything that we own, everything we possess as part of our personal effects is paid for and is bought. When it comes to love, we tend to have a different perspective about the real price of love. What I'd like to do in today's session is demonstrate how love itself comes with a price. There is no such thing as free love. Now, I know, depending on whether you are a man or you are a woman, you might have a different perspective about this. Women generally would say, you can't buy my love. And men generally believe that there is a price for everything. Men, we are cost-benefit calculators, and therefore we tend to think in numbers. Intrinsically in a man, we know that everything has a price. Women go by the assumption that love cannot be bought. In any case, I think both parties hold on to their perspectives. And what I would like to do in today's session is demonstrate how everything is bought and everything has a price. Many a times I've heard the aphorism, there is no free lunch. Now, one of the great things about aphorisms is that they always have, especially the important ones, they have their opposites. There is no such thing as a free lunch. The opposite of that is the best things in life are free. And love is one of the things that is usually used as an example of what you get for free, something that you cannot buy. In order to explain this concept, let me use a different analogy. Let me put love aside, relationships aside, marriage aside, and let's talk about buildings or maybe cars. These are tangible items, objects, effects that most people either acquire or utilize. For some people, it's an asset, and for some other people, it's simply you could say a commodity, a means to an end. If you own a building, those who are homeowners perhaps will relate to what I'm about to share, which is, in order to purchase the building, if you went through with the purchase process and you were successful, the government expects you to pay a tax on the purchase. Once the purchase is completed, there will be additional expenses associated with that purchase. That will sum up to an amount in pounds or in any currency of exchange. We call that initial cost outlay your capital expenditure, which deals with all of the capital you had to put down in exchange for that building, for that house, the flat. In the event of a car, the same principle applies, although there are subtle variations. But let's stick with the building analogy for now. Once you've acquired the building in London and in the rest of the United Kingdom, although the building is now yours, the government still wants you to pay taxes for owning the building. Usually they tell you that the taxes you're paying is part of the operating costs of providing services to that building. So they want you to pay what we call a council tax. If you own, for example, a 4 or 5 bedroom house, you could be paying between £2,500 and £3,000, depending on where you live. You could be paying that amount in council taxes every single year, just because you own the building. And certainly there are some services that the government provides. But nonetheless, that is a tax. You also then have expenses you incur every single month as a result of ownership. When we combine all of those costs that you incur on a monthly basis or on an annual basis, that becomes your overall operating expense. We call that OPEX. So I have identified two separate costs: your capital expenditure, CapEx, and your operating expenditure, OPEX. So the best way to understand what the actual cost of ownership of the building is to take into account all of the costs you incur every month or every year into the future. You take the present value of all of those costs and you add it to your initial, depending on how you've made the purchase, you can add it to your initial outlay. That will give you the overall cost of the building. Let's say you bought the building in a shrewd manner. The net benefit of that purchase will then be the present value of that building less all of the costs you have incurred, both your operating cost, your capital expenditure. If it's positive, then we say you have a net positive value, meaning you have some equity. Generally, men understand this logic. We're always looking for more value than what we exchange in price or money. We're always doing calculations comparing the benefits and the cost. We understand that concept very clearly when it comes to making investment decisions. If we're buying a car, we make the same comparison as to what it would cost to purchase and what it would cost to operate. There are some buildings that might be easy to buy, but very expensive to operate or to own because they have very high operating costs. Similarly, some cars may be expensive to purchase, but the costs in the long term are expected to be low. For example, a Tesla. You might argue that the cost of a Tesla relative to other cars, the capital cost is slightly higher, but the operating cost over the long term is very attractive, and therefore the net value from the usage of the car exceeds the costs of both acquisition and ownership. Now, this concept that I've just explained makes sense, logical sense. I hope you hold on to that logical mindset as I move and transition into relationships. Now, men play a very different game than women in the game of love and sex. There are two marketplaces. One is the dating marketplace and the other is the marriage marketplace. In the dating marketplace, which is what I have been focusing on for several weeks and several sessions, the game we play is as follows. We want to get, and by we I'm talking about men in general, certainly yes, there are exceptions to the rule, I agree. But in general, men want to have the most variety of sexual encounters and the highest quantity of sexual partners for the least amount of resources or cost. Women play a different game. They want to obtain the most amount of resources, money, power, fame, influence, access, and they want to give up or give in exchange for that the least amount of sex. Now, whoever plays that game properly wins. Men take it a step further in that we want the most attractive women. We want many of those women, and we want each of those women to have very, very low operating costs, and more importantly, acquisition cost. So the money we spend at the early stage of getting to know you is what we will call the capital expenditure. If we start dating you, something I recommend against for men between 18 years and 35. But if we do date you, the cost of maintaining that relationship is what we call the operating cost. You combine both and you have the overall cost of the relationship. So one of the things men have to do is calculate or estimate the total cost of a relationship. In other words, the love tax. Men have to understand, how much of a love tax do I have to pay? In other words, how much is her love? And what would it cost me? And can I afford it? Now, part of all relationships, and sometimes most relationships, we do not come to the conversation or to the table with such a mindset. And most people listening to what I'm saying might be offended. They might be gritting their teeth. They might be wincing and wondering, what on earth is this man talking about? But hang with me for a second, because I think if you were to go back to the logic I started with buildings, it means relationships are really no different. This is probably one of the most elementary form of game theory. The principles apply to buildings. The principle applies to cars. The principle should apply to relationships. Now, when love gets involved, we get somewhat excited. In any case, my recommendation to men who are between 18 years and 35 is that those 18 long years or short years are perhaps the most important years of your life. And you will be tempted, and you will wake up every morning like most teenagers do. And one of the questions they ask themselves is, I have this massive potential ahead of me. I have this glorious future that could manifest at some point. But what can I do every single day to sabotage that future? How can I screw things up in my life so I never get to find out or discover the man I could be? Now, someone once said to me many years ago, that hell on earth would be to meet the person that you could have been. And for some strange reason, between the age of 18 years all the way up to 35, there is almost a longing. Sometimes we cannot explain what that longing is about and where it comes from, but it's almost a longing for us to sabotage our future, to abort our dreams, to cancel our vision. And most of the time it happens because of a woman. Which is why I say relationships and women can be dream killers to men. Not because women want to be, or not because the relationship is inherently wrong, but it's more so because men, during that period of their lives, do not have the maturity, and most of them do not have people like myself who can be dispassionate about such topics and who can explain that there is a cost you have to pay. Now, I have no issues with relationships. I simply suggest that you delay relationships and serious relationships until you're 35, so that you have enough time to make something of yourself, to have that baby, which is your dream, have it birth, to bring forth into the world your greatness, to make something of yourself, to allow yourself to come to a level of manhood and maturity, so that the responsibilities that will come with relationships and love and marriage and family is something that you can bear. Now, let me transition slightly, because in order for you to create wealth, which is something most young men intrinsically desire, we have to play a game. We've been raised very, very poorly on the basic concept of how this game should be played. Most people, for the most part, play the game as follows. They earn, they spend, they save. and very few invest. During the pandemic, we saw that the average family could not and did not have close to £300 in savings. And part of the reason is because we simply earn, spend, and then save. And then if we have some money saved, we invest. Investing is therefore the last thing we do. Unfortunately, that approach seldom works in creating wealth, because there's a concept that we have unfortunately not been reminded about over the years and over the decades, which is that a part of all you earn is yours to keep. And that if you want to create a wealthy, successful, fulfilling life in the future, you have to pay yourself first. Therefore, the right game should be you earn, you invest first, then you spend, and if there's something left, you save. It's simply a shifting of the what would be an equation, a formula. You bring investment forward, so it's the first thing you do. And the general advice is 10% of what you earn should be invested first. Because if you were to look through your bank statement, one of the things you would notice is as soon as money comes into your account from your wages, your workplace, everyone gets paid first. You pay the rent, you pay the taxes, you pay the groceries, shopping, you pay for transportation. Everyone gets paid but you. And the idea here is if you pay yourself first, you discipline yourself to live within your means. So if you pay yourself a 10% tax, what I call an investment tax, balance of what you have to discipline yourself and find ways to meet those expenses. And if something is left, you save. In a similar fashion, if you translate that concept to what I'm trying to advise young men, I'm saying between 18 years and 35, if you're not careful, in pursuit of love and in pursuit of your relationships and in pursuit of sex, you will be drawn into signing an agreement, sometimes in the form of a marriage, sometimes not really signing something physical, but an agreement in good faith, which is a relationship. Or you might even be encouraged to spend all you have simply because you want to get sex. And my view is, no. First, I want you to invest. Take all of that money you earn and put that money in the soil. The soil is your future. Put that money in your soil. Take the seed, put it in the soil, and wait for the seasons. Invest first in yourself, and whatever you have left, you can spend. Everything you do between the age of 18 years and 35 should be an investment. It shouldn't be you shouldn't be a spender, wasting money. Now, what this means is, generally speaking, you might come across someone who does not like to show affection. And this is where I move to what I call the myth of the benefits of a relationship or of marriage. Women believe that there is no price for their love and that their love cannot be bought. Historically, the reason that women can say that is because men have been the ones who are the creators of wealth. Women have been the ones who are the consumers of wealth. We earn and they spend. Now, I know in the last 10 years and 15 years, things have changed. Women are now doing just as well as men in several fields. But historically speaking, men have been the ones who went out and brought home the bacon. And therefore we understood how difficult it is to catch the pig. And therefore, when we spend the bacon and when we consume the bacon, we are careful. And because we know the price we pay to get the bacon, we understand that there are different currencies for purchasing whatever you want. A woman's love may not be bought with money, but money is simply a derivative of time. Sometimes it's affection, sometimes it could be time, sometimes it could be your ability to listen, sometimes it could actually be brokenness, sometimes it could be money. In any case, the common denominator is time. Every one of us gets 24 hours every day, rich or poor, tall, short. We get the same time. And what we do with that time decides the outcomes we get in life. So I may not be investing my money in exchange for your love, but if I'm investing my time, certainly my time has value in monetary terms. Therefore, anything can be bought with money. Now, this is fascinating because in the ancient books of antiquities, there is a statement that baffles most people, especially most theologians. It says, "The money answereth all things." I understand the meaning. I exchange my time, my resources in terms of human capital, my sweat, my blood, my memories, in exchange for money. And therefore, technically speaking, money does answer all things. But women have been raised in this myth that relationships have benefits and marriage comes with its benefits. I do not disagree with that. I only say wait until 35 before you actually take that experiment. In the interim, what I would like is for you, the man, to get really, really skilled at being able to estimate the net benefit of a relationship. Now, let me give you a good example. Over the last few weeks, we have seen the trial of Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. Let me draw an interesting set of facts from the trials. We've been told by those who were sworn in on the stands that Amber Heard wanted Johnny Depp to pay her $40 million when he decided to terminate the relationship or the marriage. The accountant who represented Johnny Depp indicated that she wanted that to be tax-free, and he explained that what that meant was Johnny Depp had to pay $40 million as a way of saying goodbye. So his parting gift for a relationship or a marriage that did not last was $40 million. Now, that wouldn't seem too extreme, except for the fact that they had no kids and they had only been married for 18 months. But it gets more interesting. Of the 18 months that they were married, they technically only spent 12 months together. 8 months, they never really spent together. That was one person had moved out and the marriage they knew was going to come to an end, and it was just pain and blood and sweat and misery. So for 12 months, that cost him $40 million. If you divide 40 by 12, that would mean that Johnny Depp was paying, this is stunning, roughly about $2.8 million every single month to get a benefit, which was Amber Heard. Now we know, being a movie actor, he traveled a lot, obviously did a lot of drugs, both did. But let's play, and let's assume that the monthly encounters they had sexually were above the average. And let's say they had sex once every week. Once every week would mean roughly 4 times every month, all things being equal. At $2.8 million, that would mean every single sexual encounter was roughly 750 or 780 Now I know you might say, well, everything wasn't down to sex. Well, split the difference. That is a lot of money in exchange for sex. But even if we assume it wasn't just for sex, it was for her company, and she was a muse, and was an inspiration to him, which I doubt. If we say the $2.8 million every single month was spread across 20 days of the month, assuming they spent 20 days of the month together, that is still an astonishing amount of money. $2.8 million divided by 20, which is 20 working days, is a lot of money. Still comes down to a very, very significant amount of money. You're talking about roughly $140,000 per day for her love. Now, why am I using all of this? Well, the calculation Johnny Depp made was that the pain of being in the relationship far exceeded the price he had to pay. Now, we've heard people say before that one of the reasons why divorce is very expensive is because it's worth it. Now, the point I'm making by this is to suggest that marriage really is an alternative form or a glorified form of prostitution. You can make the same claim for dating. Now, I did not include all of the money Johnny Depp spent leading up to the marriage, when he was still dating Amber Heard and when he was very romantic and there was a lot of happiness. The point I'm making is that in deciding to leave the marriage, they had no kids. She asked for $40 million. If you included taxes. For a relationship that really, really did not last more than 12 months, despite the 18-year period. The point I'm making being that everything has a price. Amber Heard made it very clear at the end of the relationship that there was a price to being with her. The price he paid during the courting phase and the dating phase was part of his capital expenditure. The price he paid during the dating and the marriage was part of his operating expenditure. However, at the end of the marriage, the $40 million was again an indication that there was more capital expenditure that he did not calculate. Now let's sum all of the costs and say all he spent was $50 million. One could make the plausible case, $50 million for a 2-year relationship. That is a lot of money. Everyone has a price. Everyone's payment terms are different. The currency of exchange is different. Now, yours might be time, you being the woman. Yours might be affection, intimacy. But the idea that there is no cost to your love is a myth. Therefore, and this is where I bring today's session to a close, the question every man should ask when you meet a woman is a simple one. What is the cost of her love? And what would be the cost of having a 24/7 companion in this woman? And what cost can I endure at the start of the relationship, during the courting phase, in the relationship phase, and post the relationship phase? I explain to young men between 18 and 35 that one of the reasons to abstain from relationships is because sometimes we're not like Johnny Depp. We make the unforgivable mistake of getting the woman pregnant. Therefore, at the end of the relationship, if it doesn't work, you, the man, have 18 years of child support payment and sometimes almost 18 years of alimony to pay to the woman for the mistake of not waiting until you were married not waiting until you had achieved your dreams, and not waiting until you were 35 before you had a child. So there is a cost of love. It might be better for you, the man, rather than think with your small head, to think with your big head, to recognize that everyone's love has a cost. The woman's love has a cost. Your love, the man, also comes with a cost. Your cost might be money, peace, silence, submission, but there is a cost. We all have a cost. Now, if I were to turn this shirt around, there is a tag. Now, the price tag has been taken out when I wore this for the first time. But before I left the shops, there was a price tag. I had to pay the price before I exited the shop. There is no shame in acknowledging that everything comes with a price. And so, for young men between the age of 18 years up to 35, you have a very important decision to make. You can go through the process of churning through relationships, most of which will amount to nothing. You keep expending a capital expenditure, an operating expenditure, and sometimes, if you're not too wise, an exit expenditure. Or you can decide that rather than simply pay such a high price, that you will simply rent. It might be better to rent than to own. I'll go back to Johnny Depp. Is it possible that Johnny Depp for $10,000 could have found a woman, maybe using a website, which there are so many these days, and found a sugar daddy website where he found a woman who was just as attractive as Amber Heard, and they signed an agreement, and her upkeep was $10,000. She was never going to sue because it was a mutual exchange. She understood what she had to do in terms of what he expected, and every month she got paid. Well, certainly £10,000 is not the same as £780,000 per month. Think about that, young man. Renting could be the next alternative to owning. So, in conclusion, I would say, be wise.